but he got to enjoy his children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren mostly. I mean, I say mostly with the exception of me, who he never fully understood or accepted. I think that we had many, many happy times together, many. But at the same time, we had a lot of times that weren't so happy because he had a perception of me that I've always thought was basically unfair. And I think that for me, the way I'd interpret it was that he was a man who was used as a professional in his area to sort of things being very quantifiable. So, for example, if he was doing takeovers, he was buying companies, selling companies, you know. But you had his son was an artist. His son was a creator. Everything he touched had already been created. He would just either sell it or repackage it. For me, everything was being created from zero, and I also got into what I was doing creatively extremely late in life. So he had no appreciation or understanding whatsoever of the role of a creator, and therefore it pained me that he gave me no respect, whilst I gave him huge respect. And the same thing for my younger brother. And I can understand, this is an old story, you know, this is nothing new about it. But it was, well, it was nothing new about life, you know. I think a parent wants their child to be safe. They want them to do something of which the path has already been trod, where they're going to sort of, you know, look forward to, you know, health benefits and pension plans from companies that, you know, can provide all of this after you spend your years working at them. And then for somebody like me, who's an artist, who's creating out of nothing, my father never said, you know, a supportive word. He found it all baffling, and he would you know, set up conditions which were actually rather sounded great to him, but they actually weren't very realistic. You know, he'd say to me, look, the test of whether you're any good or not is whether you're making money. Well, the fact was that's actually not the test. The test is not when it comes to art. You know, art's a strange thing. I was busy spending perhaps 25 years creating techniques and a body of work that could constitute something of value. But on the way there, I wasn't trying to sell piecemeal, you know, every time I did something to try and sell it. I made no effort to do that whatsoever. Now, he would have liked me to have done that. We quarreled about that sort of thing. He couldn't understand the challenges that I faced as an artist in a world of unbelievably large amount of other artists, and very small amount of galleries, and the ability and it's not an easy business to get into to make a success out of it financially. But you had to look at the other dimension, that you were absolutely driven to do it, and that you couldn't almost stop doing it once the creative bug had seized hold of you. But I did the very best I could with what I had. So my father could have had dialogues with me. He could have said to me, you know, could you explain to me why you do it the way you do, and could you explain to me why you're not selling, and how can I suggest to you ways you have around this, and I might have then been able to have a dialogue with him and explain to him the challenges that I faced and why I was doing things the way that I was doing things. But he made no opportunity to do that with me. So I came to the conclusion. I wrote him a long email about failure, because he'd used that word and it upset me a great deal. And I said to him, you know, I haven't missed out on you. You've missed out on me. In other words, throughout my life, I'd supported what he did. I was interested in what he did. Everything was wonderful about that. I admired everything he did. But I wasn't going to tolerate a situation as an adult, and being very proficient at what I was doing, in which you didn't have a single dialogue with me about it. And in that sense, I think that he missed out on the pleasure that we could have had of talking about these things. Now, how much of a victim should I feel? His own sister Rosalind, you know, it doesn't mention DNA on her tombstone. Did her family actually recognize what even my aunt was doing? Did it interest them? I suspect not, actually. And even to this day, nobody's bothered to put the words DNA on her tombstone. How much do people actually care about other people and their lives and their challenges? But I wasn't going to let my father be selfish and let it all be about him. and not acknowledge me as an adult. So I wrote him a letter saying to him, look, if you can't acknowledge me and what I do and you're not prepared to talk about it, then we shouldn't be in the same room, because this is the most important thing to me in my life. And every time you avoid mentioning it or make some sort of callous remark about it, it's extremely alienating and demeaning and insulting, and I won't tolerate it. So I had to stand my ground. And my father never responded to my letter. I have no idea if he even read it to this day. But, you know, I was content that I'd said my piece. I was content that I was not going to change what I was doing to please him. And if he didn't want to talk about it, well, he had plenty of other people to talk about other things with. And, you know, luckily he had, you know, 5 other children, all with husbands and wives, and multiple grandchildren and great-grandchildren, and God bless him, he just couldn't have me. If he wasn't going to acknowledge what I did, and the fact that I was doing everything that I could to be excellent at what I did and original, and that I was facing a tremendous challenge in creating a whole body of work starting from my 40s, late in life. So I'm not particularly sad about it. I absorbed it all in my mind. I told him, you know, this is where I stand, and I think that's the most important thing. Is you know, you stake out your battleground, your battle lines, and after that, I felt perfectly comfortable. I'd said what I had to say, and if he didn't react to it, so be it. That was his loss, not mine. I'm happy to carry on with that.
Yeah. So, did he ever threaten to not support you if you kept at your art? Did he ever say, like, I'm not going to financially support you unless you make money?
I'd rescued my father in 1973 from bankruptcy. His company had lost, effectively in today's terms, $4 billion. The fact that my father, along with my brothers and sisters, was supportive because he'd made a lot of money in Wall Street in the 80s was, you know, I have never denied that he was a supportive father. He was a generous father. But money, and you know, as this group you may have heard of, the Beatles, once said, money can't buy you love. It's a wise saying. One thing, I acknowledged my father's generosity, but he wasn't very loving. You know, I would get more. I told my adopted child, and I tell my dog more times per half hour that I love them than my father ever said in his entire life. I think people, when they don't express, you know, find themselves unable to express these feelings at all, that's not helpful. I think that, you know, to constantly be the brunt of criticism and this feeling that you're being judged doesn't get you anywhere. It's very negative. And I think it diminished my father. I think that he was marvelous at what he did, and I was marvelous at what I did. And I could say it to him, and he should have said it to me, and he should have discussed it with me, and he should have enjoyed what I do. There's nothing terrible. It was beautiful. You're dealing with beauty. He knew that I loved the arts more than anybody else in my family. I mean, he knew perfectly well I was the one person who would instantly want to talk to him about opera and classical music and those things. I'm not saying my other brothers and sisters don't have appreciation. They do. But I think I was more intense about it. And I was meant to be an artist, and his other children were not. But not acknowledging it at all was cast a shadow between us. I can't deny it. And my mother was pretty much the same. I remember going down to our island proudly with two of my books, my figurative art book and my cosmic book, stuff that I think that most people, when they look at it, would marvel at and say, how beautiful, how clever, how did you do it, and everything like that. My mother sort of looked at it, and then she said, looks like one big mess to me. What a memory for me to have. That's all she ever said. And she had a capacity to be a bit bitchy. I mean, you know, in the very early stages when I was developing as an artist, I did have a small exhibition, and I think she came to it. And then she would say to people, my son, I don't know if you know my son, he's very clever, but people don't like this sort of thing, do they? And people don't like blue people. I've told my son, there's beautiful statues in Central Park, and I told him you should do a book of beautiful statues in Central Park, and you have lots of nephews and nieces. You should be shooting the nephews and nieces, and you should take your camera. You should go out in the street, and you should be doing this. So this was like, I forgive my mother, because it's so funny when you look back on it. It was just so nothing to do with my life whatsoever, but just so full of her own perceptions of what you ought to be doing. And so this was created an incredible barrier between us of, oh, well, I can't really discuss what you're doing because it's sort of ridiculous, No, 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 it wasn't. I mean, you had a son who's done, what I've done just in terms of my cosmic work. I mean, there's not a single person in the world has done any of the type of work that I've done. Impressionist visions of outer space. Go looking in Google and go and find it if you can. I've never seen it. So I think that their criteria was all about money. Now, I care about money too, but I care about money as a byproduct of years of work to put together a collection that's worthy of being, taken very seriously. And I understood the gallery process. I understood the limitations of an artist when you're developing, and it just took me a very long time to develop my work.
Did their opinions about your art affect your brothers and sisters?
I think that their opinions did affect my brothers and sisters. I think that there were the sort of mutterings within the family that were just not supportive. That, I don't think people thought I was crazy, but I think that, they didn't understand it, and they didn't make any effort to understand it. I think that what you have to do is, ask somebody. Say to me, now listen, this really sounds interesting. You're clearly totally absorbed with it. Now, it seems a bit odd to me because of, where's it leading to, and how do you make money from what you're doing? But, I didn't have any of these conversations. Nobody called me up to really do it. People would just sort of judge, are you sure you're not wasting your time? Are you sure you're not delusional? I had a break with my younger sister, who, when I had people approach me previously about a documentary, I thought, well, who could I get from my family to sort of say some kind words? I actually couldn't really think of anybody, but I thought, well, my sister, maybe, my younger sister, I got on very well with her. Maybe she's a good person to talk to. So I asked her, would she speak on the documentary? She said yes, and then she spoke to the director without her knowing that I was on the phone, and she said to him, well, I'll do it, take about a week for me to say something nice about my brother, and besides, I think he's delusional about his work. Now, that really made me very angry. To this day, I haven't spoken to my sister since then, because I understand my sister's mind. She thought she was being witty. She thought she was being funny. She thought the fact that I could say that my work was original meant that I was puffing myself up and making myself grandiose. And the English have this sort of trait that they don't want you to do that, so they want to bring you down a peg or two. So my sister thought she was being funny in order to sort of bring me down to earth. And she apologized, and I forgave her, but I just didn't want to talk to her again. I mean, the fact that I apologized and said, well, anybody who could have said something like that, I mean, what kind of a mind? Nobody else that I know says that. But I have to remember also from the Bible, from the New Testament, from Mark, a prophet is with honor, except in his hometown. And meaning that, everybody else, could speak about my work with respect, except my own family, because they couldn't believe that I could be doing something respectable with art. I mean, it was outside of their mind. They know nothing about art at all. I mean, they have the odd painting in their house, and they're not without taste, but they don't pretend to be serious about art. But they never ask a question either about what it's like to be an artist and the things that I have to face, and what it's like to have to try and be original. So you either collapse in the face of that and get discouraged and don't do anything, or you learn to take absolutely no notice.
Have you reconciled with any of your brothers and sisters since then?
I'm not close with any of them. And that comes from them being, I think, judgmental, which alienates me. And it also comes from them being really, I have a problem with my youngest brother who owns the estate now that my parents are dead in Antigua, and we have a tremendous clash on basic values. And I think that they don't want to risk alienating him, frankly.
I see. So it all comes down to money and power.
Yes.